Hello everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of Kerbal Space Program. The last episode we put a satellite up in the... not in the atmosphere, in orbit, and we had a bit of an unresolved question about like how to send science back. So in between episodes, I went and looked to see if I could... not the manual. See if I could figure anything out about it. And I did, so I thought I would show you guys. Let's just click on this. It turned out that there's this setting here on this guy, which was allow partial. And if you click on it, it says require complete. And it's phrased like an action. When you click on it, you will start requiring complete. And when you click on this, you will start allowing partial. And that's the way they phrase most things that are toggles. And often, even, they include, like, a thing over here telling you what state it's currently in if it's unclear. But it turns out that this is phrased backwards from the way that I expected. What is here is the current mode that you are actually in. We are now in allow partial mode. And, so I did that, and then... I did that, and then found this thing here, and said to please transmit. Oh, is it in hibernate mode or something? No, it's just, there's nothing to do with this. Alright. So anyway, I told it to please transmit, and it just slammed the battery down to 0, of course, as our previous transmit had been doing. But it also continued to keep trying to transmit. As soon as we gained any smidgen of electric charge, it immediately went back down to 0 and transmitted the data. So we don't really care about the science that we got back from this, of course. It was like 0.1 science. But as a result, well, it's already gone. But we completed our contract. The whole reason we brought this science up was because we wanted to complete a contract saying, get some science from orbit, or from space. And we did that, and we got our money for the contract, so that's all handled. Alright, how do I go back to the... we can stop looking at this. So great, we have a thing in orbit. It transmitted the science we wanted. Amazing. And I also did a bit more... I was still confused about what was the deal with the scientific experiments that were happening here. And so I looked up, like, how scientific data is transferred around. And I learned that... wow, the music seems really loud. Is it really loud? I don't know, maybe it's okay. Anyway, I learned that apparently the crew cabin is a thing that can store data. Basically, store scientific experiments. Up to 1 copy of each distinct experiment. So, like, observing mystery goo in space above Kerbin, that's 1 experiment. Observing mystery goo in orbit around the moon, that's another experiment. You can store both of those in the crew cabin, no problem. But you can't store 2 of either of them. And likewise, a surface sample. That's 1 thing. You can store that in the crew cabin. Surface sample from a particular place, even. And so when Jeb got back into the ship, the experiments he had were implicitly transferred out of his inventory onto the ship. So they're not lost after all. If we can land someone here to pick him up, then he'll be able to bring back that science. So if we can send something to the moon, a lander with a crew cabin to bring Jeb back, we'll recover that science, and it won't have all been a waste. There you go. Jeb could put on like a puppet show, or at least some kind of theater performance over there. These look kind of like the Limelight. Ha ha ha. They're green. Anyway, so that's an update on Jeb's situation. See you later, though, Jeb. We're not doing anything with you right now. So, should we go get Jeb? I feel like that's still a little bit beyond what we're particularly, that good at doing just yet. I think we could try, and with some changes we might get there. But I would like to have a bit more science and so on, and So I had mentioned doing like a flyby of Minmus or something, which I said was probably not that much harder than going to the moon, because it's just like, it's further out, but getting extra distance when you're slingshotting off the planet, it's not that much more distance to get to the moon than to get to Minmus than to get to the moon. The main difficulty is just that you have to adjust your orbital inclination, but we know how to do that. It's no big deal. Or, of course, you could wait for it to arrive at the ascending or descending node and catch it there. But it probably has a pretty long orbital period, and I'm not inclined to wait that long, given that we know how to adjust our orbit and it doesn't cost that much fuel. Anyway, and so when I was reading online about, like, geez, this lander that I built for the moon looks extremely tall and dumb. It doesn't seem like a great lander. That's one reason I want more science, is like I can't build a very good lander right now. And I realized, again, looking at stuff online, that it's not necessarily the case that we don't have the science to build a good lander. Hang on, let me interrupt that thought with what I was going to say about, yes, so that it's pretty easy to get to Minmus, and notably, because gravity is much lower on Minmus, it's actually way easier to land on Minmus than the moon. It's further away, so like, oh, it must be harder, but actually no, the fact that the moon has so much gravity is what makes it hard to land there. On Minmus, it's much more forgiving. Someone had a saying that I quite liked: if you can crash on the moon, you can land on Minmus. Which I think is probably, I agree with that, thinking about, like, they mentioned that on Minmus, gravity is so light that even if you land sideways, like, a reaction wheel can fight gravity and upright your ship. So that would be perfect. Imagine if we had made our moon landing on Minmus instead. Jeb would be on his way back home today. So, and the other thing was that the landers that I've built have been very vertical, because that's how we've been building our takeoff rockets. You just stack more fuel on top of itself and put an engine on the bottom and more stages on top, and like, ta-da, you're there. I started building a few things off camera, trying to get a handle on like a few of these ideas and improvements. I ended up with 3 iterations of a Mooner rescue ship, which I will just show you now. This first one, the Mooner Rescue 1, is basically the exact same ship that we took to the moon the first time, with a couple of changes. I think I added this fuel. I think this wasn't there before, so it's like, I don't know, 50% more fuel in the lander stage. Replaced the science with a crew cabin. Moved the reaction wheel up, or yeah, that's what this is, the reaction wheel, and moved it to 4 legs on the lander instead of 3. It was pointed out that a square is way more stable than a triangle in terms of like rotational forces, so it's easier to land this way. And then did I add any RCS on this? I guess I didn't. So that's another thing that I would sort of like to do, is add some RCS to adjust, to compensate for having what's the word that I'm thinking? For having weird translational velocity. So we could fix that. But anyway, I didn't put that on this stage. This is Mooner Rescue version 1. And I looked at this and was like, alright, if this is our lander stage, going from here all the way up to here, it's still going to be really hard to land on the moon. So this is no good. So I built a Mooner Rescue 2. Where, what did I change in this one? I added the RCS. This is an RCS fuel tank, but where's the actual RCS? Did I forget to put it on? Looks that way. Alright, well this is definitely a non-starter. I also, I think, put a few more science experiments on, because now I sort of understand, like, that you don't have to recover the science experiment itself. You can move it into the cockpit in flight. So I figured we could grab a little extra science on things that Jeb didn't bring with him. But okay, this one is really not fundamentally any better. It has the same problems with landing. Adding RCS might help, but it's still kind of an issue. And then I got to this Mooner Rescue 3, where I made a dramatic change to the lander based on some suggestions that I saw of like how to build a basic lander, which is build radially. You don't want to be tall. You want to be squat, so you have a low center of gravity. And where's our... So if we detach this decoupler, just to look at it for a bit, and look at our center of mass, it's like right at the bottom of the lander, pretty close to it. So great, right? That's an improvement over what we saw on. I actually didn't look at the center of mass for. Let's go do that now. Don't save. Let's go look at the Lunar Rescue 2. And what was its center of mass in the landing stage? How high was it? This was the landing stage here, right? Basically just straight up. And the center of mass is in the middle, so it's going to be much, much harder to keep steady. Okay, so that's a big part of the improvement. Don't save this. Go back to Lunar Rescue 3. And also, we get to pack a ton of fuel in by having this sort of 4-wide fuel tank, and this little tiny fuel tank in the middle here above the only engine. I was surprised to see that these fuel tanks actually will send fuel through this central fuel tank into the engine, but apparently they will. Actually we have RCS, that's what these guys here are, to adjust things. But having them all down by the center, by the bottom, I'm sorry, of the lander, seems like no matter what we do, it's going to involve tipping the robot, the rocket a bit, right? If we push the bottom in any one direction, the top will be pushed in the opposite direction. It'll tend to flip over, right? Maybe we just, like... We could put some RCS above the center of mass to counteract that. Like, say, up here. I think that that's a good idea. So, let's just toss on... Oh, the other thing is that since these lander things extend out to the sides now, the rocket is less tall, and it has these things that would get hit by the solid boosters. So I tried shrinking from the extra large solid rocket boosters to some kind of smaller ones, thinking, hey, I'm actually launching kind of a smaller rocket. Maybe I don't need quite as much fuel. And we were running the large ones at like 50% power anyway, so maybe we can just make do with smaller boosters. I did a test flight of this actually to make sure that that the fuel up here was going to work properly, and this is not really enough to get this into orbit, I think. I ended up using the central stage here, just completely used it up on getting almost into an orbit around Kerbin. Had to spend a bunch of fuel from this stage finishing up the orbit, and then there wasn't really enough to go to the moon. So I think that we're going to have to go back to the taller boosters here in Lunar Rescue 4. But I think that we can just start with a non-lander design just to do a flyby of Minmus. We could try landing on Minmus first. Kind of seems like a learn to crawl before you walk thing, though, to me. Like, shouldn't we... I don't know. I bet... And like, now that we know about recovering science, we could get some science from the from orbit and from the surface, and like, right? Like, I think we could get some really great science from sending something like this to Minmus. And I think once we're there, we could land it. So I think we'll go ahead and try that. Let's just rename this to Minmus Lander 1. We're renaming it because we're changing a couple of things on here. And I'll put just 2 RCS things on the top ought to be enough. We don't really need these to do much rotational stuff. We just want them to counter, or much translational stuff. We want them to counter what happens on the bottom. I'll just put them right here, as close to the top as possible. And if they burn up on re-entry into Kerbin, who cares, right? I think actually, though, these are massless and dragless, so they don't actually do anything. They shouldn't burn up. And so, like I said, we do need more fuel in these boosters, though. And we'll have to move the landers sort of up somehow to compensate for these larger things. So let's pull these off. Oh, whatever, get out of here. And put this kickback booster back on. Actually, so as you can see, like this causes some problems, right, with the lander stage. So we need to lift the whole thing higher up off the ground just to keep these going. And then we kind of need to move this central stage still higher, which we sort of do by moving the rocket booster stage lower. Okay, now we are like just barely have the lander stage outside of... Oh man. Actually, these barely fit. To get these mounted low enough. Maybe what I should do actually is mount these like lower on this. Can I do that? Actually, this looks okay. I'm very concerned though about like this upper stage being I don't know, it just looks really flimsy having this not extend all the way, right? Having I should zoom out. There we go. It seems like it's a recipe for disaster, but I'm not sure exactly why. It means this is not going to be very good at gimbaling, is it? Maybe it is, I don't know. We have a reaction wheel, like maybe we'll be okay. Aerodynamics, so pop those on. And we want these structural things holding it up for sure, since it looks pretty atrocious. Let's limit the thrust on here. We were doing like 60 something, and we were bringing only this much of the fuel. Okay. Don't forget the fins. We were using not the Delta Deluxe, the AVR8. Oh, they're already there. I just had the camera oriented like sort of side on, so I couldn't see them. Edge on, I guess. Anyway, so I think this is enough for all of our post-orbital maneuvers, so long as this gets us into orbit. Especially if we can use this central part to get to Minmus orbit. This should be way more than enough fuel once we're in Minmus. So, with crew, we can send Neilbald as the pilot. What is it exactly that engineers do? Repair broken parts. See, we don't really use any of this stuff. What parts would even break? I don't know. Increase resource converter efficiency? We're not converting any resources. Drill efficiency? I don't know what a drill is. Whereas Bob is like great. He'll greatly improve the amount of science we can get by A, multiplying the stuff that we recover, and B, allowing us to recover more things by resetting the scientific things while we're in flight. Bring back more distinct experiments. Okay, so let's look at the staging for this, which is clearly all wrong. We want to fire all these stages at the same time. Yeah, we've done this before. Then decouple these guys. Then decouple this. Yes, that's right. Fire up this engine. Decouple this. Parachute. Yeah, that looks right. Did I remember to put lights on this? Oh yeah, I put them under the fuel tanks. How cool is that? What does it look like with the lights on? And I made them blue. We didn't like the green last time. Yeah, so this is pretty cool. So we're sort of putting a lot of eggs into this basket, right? By flying like two of our best Kerbals. And I was actually thinking maybe that it's a good idea to where is this command and control thing, or is it a utility? There's a piece that I didn't really quite know what to do with. This, right? How does this work? I feel like if something goes wrong in liftoff, I would really love to be able to rescue these guys. What happens if I say take this part? Can I like put this in here? No, I don't understand how this works at all, so we're not gonna do it. Oh yeah, let's that doesn't look dangerous at all. Okay, well, whatever. Do I have a heat shield in? I do. And the decoupling all looked right. We have a reaction wheel. Okay, cool. Now we have batteries to power everything. Yeah, we have a I didn't put an RCS fuel tank on because it costs some money and it makes us unbalanced and heavier, all of which are things I'd like to avoid. And the amount of monopropellant that comes in this ought to be enough. We're not going to use very much RCS fuel at all, just a little tiny bit in the landing stage if we get there. So let's go ahead and save this Minmus Lander 1 and give her a launch. So this is also sort of a test flight for the moon landing, right? We have room for 3 Kerbals. We're bringing 2, so we'll have room for Jeb on the way back if we ever fly a rocket like this to the moon. So we're going to throttle up pretty gently. SAS on. Right, we can point prograde and retrograde. Very nice. And we already checked the staging, but it's wrong. It went back to being wrong somehow. There we go. I don't know how that happened. Cool. And also, this decoupling here, it's so close to this decoupler that it almost feels like, why do we need it? Well, the answer is it gets rid of these guys. FLT200 fuel tank. Which one? Okay, so these are sort of the medium size fuel tanks. Not the large ones, not the small ones. Okay, that's fine. So having 4 medium fuel tanks is like having 2 large ones, which I think is plenty for mid-miss activity. You know, maybe we'll find out we need more fuel, but I don't think so. Anyway, let's get ready to launch in 3, 2, 1, go. Boy, it always takes off like so spooky slow when it's this heavy. I wonder if I turned down the amount of thrust in the solid rocket things too much, or if I just forgot how unsteady, or how slow it was last time we used a launcher like this. Okay, let's try to keep the roll steady. Double check our trajectory here. Apoapsis is not very high yet, so let's try to keep pointed mostly up. Apoapsis is getting higher. Okay, let's roll over a little more. Nothing too crazy. Like that, maybe. Woo, don't spin. Push. I can't really internalize what direction which way I have to push Q or E to spin the way I want to go. Alright, so our apoapsis is already... Oh, it's perfect! Nice! Beautiful! So let's say I want to plan a maneuver here to burn prograde quite a bit. How much do I have to burn to get going the way I want? Well, that's probably fine. Oh, that's more than fine. So let's throttle that down. There we go. 2 minutes and 37 seconds. Well, look at that. We are 1 minute and 22 seconds away, so that's halfway. This thing is gonna require a bit of turn off the SAS. Let's get this pointed the right way. Gonna require quite a long thing. We didn't get as going as fast as we usually do, I guess. I don't know. We'll start burning now. And we're a bit off axis because I got a little bit of wobble in the takeoff. No big deal. Now let's turn off this maneuver node, please. I just wanted it to guess how much burn we needed. Now that we're burning, we don't need it anymore. And I just want to keep an eye on our apoapsis here. Not because I expect this side to change much, but once the apoapsis gets... Once we move our periapsis up out of the atmosphere, this will become our periapsis, and that side will become the apoapsis, and I'd like to see how high it is. Alright, let's get a bit more towards the horizon, please. How's our fuel? We're almost out. Well, I mean, not almost, but... Boy, this upper stage sure is a lot heavier than previously with the lander on it. We just added a lot more fuel to it than before, so this rocket feels a bit sluggish. But our apoapsis is at 80 kilometers now. Can we get... just stay right on the horizon. Ooh. I'm worried we are not going to get into a proper orbit without having to use up some fuel from our orbital stage. Well, we gotta burn. Activate this stage, please. Alright, the rocket just got a fair bit lighter. So hopefully... But we have now... Well, I guess it's the same engine, really, so maybe it's fine. Yeah, the rocket is a lot lighter, and we're pushing with the same engine, so we should catch up sort of quickly to where we want to be. Apoapsis coming up any second now. Yeah, and if we have to give up on the landing part because we don't have enough fuel, that's fine. We can just do a flyby and adjust later. There's our periapsis. Let's just circularize and then cut the engines. Good enough. This isn't perfectly circular, but we're out of the atmosphere on the other side. And then we should be able to regularize okay. Set the moon as the target, and... not the moon. I did say the moon, but I meant Minmus. So that'll tell us that our descending node is here. And so if we want to adjust our orbit to match Minmus's, we should burn... Keep the descending node in mind. We should burn not that much, just a hair. And that's close enough. Just a 19-second burn. Gosh, that's longer than I expected, actually. So we'll do that. You know what, actually, we'll leave these orbital maneuvers for the next episode. We got into orbit here with a ship that looks like it can get to Minmus, maybe land on it, not sure, and come back. So let's have a little bit of... No. We're not... All the fun will be coming in the next episode. Stay tuned. So there, you're not going to get any more fun out of me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.